They tell you to toughen up, to grow thicker skin, to stop being so damn sensitive. The world belongs to the strong, the stoic, the unshakable, or so they claim. But what if the most celebrated human quality throughout history has been entirely backwards? What if our obsession with emotional toughness is actually killing us, making us blind to the very signals that could save our relationships, our health, our planet? What if sensitivity isn't weakness, but the highest form of intelligence, one that corporate culture, educational systems, and even modern parenting actively work to destroy? What if we've been systematically eliminating the very trait that separates truly exceptional humans from merely functional ones? They whispered it behind your back in grade school. Your parents said it with concerned faces at the dinner table. Your boss implied it during your last performance review. Too sensitive. Two simple words that somehow became the heaviest burden many of us carry. Two words that made you question your worth, your place in this world, your very nature. What if I told you they were wrong? Not just slightly mistaken, profoundly, cosmically incorrect. What if that sensitivity you've been taught to hide, to overcome, to apologize for, is actually your greatest gift? The world breaks everyone, and afterwards, some are stronger at the broken places. But the sensitive ones, you don't just grow stronger, you grow wiser, you grow deeper, you grow more connected to the truth of what it means to be fully human. When was the last time you cried at something beautiful? When did you last feel another's pain as if it were your own? When did you notice the subtle shift in someone's expression that told you they needed help before they even knew it themselves? That wasn't weakness. That was your power revealing itself. You've been told a story about sensitivity that simply isn't true. The story says sensitive people are fragile, easily hurt, unable to function in the real world. But I'm here to tell you a different story, one that's been hidden from you your entire life. Sensitivity isn't about being easily wounded. It's about being exquisitely attuned. It's not fragility, it's heightened awareness. Think about the instruments scientists use to detect changes in our universe. The most valuable ones aren't the toughest or most durable. They're the most sensitive. They can detect the faintest signals from distant stars, the slightest tremors beneath the earth, the most subtle changes in temperature or pressure. These instruments aren't valued despite their sensitivity, but because of it. Their sensitivity is what makes them invaluable tools for understanding our world. You are just such an instrument. Your sensitivity allows you to detect what others miss. The emotional undercurrents in a room, the unspoken needs of those around you, the beauty in ordinary moments that others rush past, the warning signs of harm before damage is done. What would happen if we reframed sensitivity not as a character flaw to overcome, but as a... In coal mines of old, miners brought canaries underground with them. These birds were not chosen for their strength or resilience. They were chosen precisely for their sensitivity. Their delicate respiratory systems would detect toxic gases long before humans could, giving miners crucial early warning of danger. The canary wasn't weak. It was the miner's most important safety system. In our complex, often toxic modern world, sensitive people play the same role. You feel the wrongness in situations first. You detect the subtle shifts in relationships, organizations, and societies that indicate something is amiss. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed tension? Nobody was acknowledging. Have you noticed a friend's pain beneath their smile when everyone else accepted their "I'm fine"? Have you felt disturbed by cultural practices others simply accept as normal? That's your sensitivity functioning exactly as it should. As an early warning system, not just for yourself, but for all of us. The miners didn't ridicule the canary for being too sensitive. They didn't tell it to toughen up. They recognized its sensitivity as essential for collective survival. What might change if we viewed sensitive people the same way? Perhaps you've been told you feel too much. Too much sadness at the world's suffering. Too much joy at simple pleasures. Too much anxiety over potential outcomes. Too much everything. But feeling deeply isn't a curse. It's living fully. Those who feel less may suffer less, true. But they also experience less wonder, less connection, less of the profound richness that makes life meaningful. They miss the full spectrum of human experience, settling instead for a narrower, safer, but ultimately diminished version of life. Consider the person who stands before a breathtaking sunset and feels nothing. Who reads heart-wrenching poetry and remains unmoved? Who can witness suffering without compassion stirring within them? Would you trade places with that person? Your capacity to be moved, to be touched deeply by life, isn't a weakness to overcome. It's the very faculty that makes life worth living. There's a profound wisdom and sensitivity that our action-oriented, tough-it-out culture often misses. The sensitive person knows instinctively what science has only recently confirmed, that we are all connected, that beneath our apparent separateness lies a web of relationship binding us to each other and to all living things. When you feel hurt by unkindness, even when it's not directed at you personally, you're not being irrational. You're recognizing a fundamental truth. Harm to any part of the human family is harm to the whole. Your pain is evidence not of weakness, but of wholeness, of your intact connection to the larger body of humanity. This interconnection is real, not metaphorical. Studies in fields from neuroscience to quantum physics increasingly demonstrate that separation is largely an illusion. At the deepest levels of reality, relationship is fundamental. The sensitive person intuitively grasps this truth. You live from this understanding naturally, feeling the joys and sorrows of others as your own, not because you failed to establish proper boundaries, but because you perceive accurately the boundless nature of reality itself. That's not a disorder, that's wisdom. At the heart of sensitivity lies empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And empathy, my friends, is the one quality our troubled world needs most desperately. Look around. What lies at the root of our most pressing problems? Whether we speak of political polarization, environmental destruction, racial injustice, or economic inequality, at their core lies a fundamental empathy deficit, the inability or unwillingness to feel with. And for others, especially those different from ourselves, the sensitive among us naturally bridge these divides. You can't help but imagine what it feels like to walk in another's shoes. You instinctively consider how your actions affect others. You feel the connections our individualistic culture tries to deny. This natural empathy isn't just a nice personal quality. It's an evolutionary advantage for humanity as a whole. Empathy enabled our ancestors to form the cooperative bonds necessary for survival. It remains essential for solving the complex collective challenges we face today. Far from being something to overcome, your sensitive, empathic nature represents the highest development of human consciousness. You're not behind, you're ahead, not weaker. Let's talk about courage. Our culture celebrates a particular kind of courage. The ability to suppress fear, to push through pain, to remain unmoved in the face of horror or tragedy. We call this being, but there is another kind of courage that receives far less recognition, yet demands far more of us. The courage to remain open in a world that wounds, the courage to continue feeling in a society that numbs. The courage to witness suffering when every instinct cries out for us to look away. This is the courage of the sensitive soul. And make no mistake, it is courage of the highest order. To move through life with your heart fully open requires more bravery than rushing into a burning building, because you do it every day knowing you will be hurt, knowing you will be overwhelmed, knowing you will be called too much and too sensitive, and choosing to remain true to your nature anyway. Dyer fighter's courage lasts minutes or hours. Yours must last a lifetime. I wonder if those who dismiss sensitivity as weakness have ever tried to live a single day, fully feeling everything, every slight, every sorrow, every joy, every beauty, without armoring themselves against life's intensity. Most would find it unbearable. Yet this is how you live all the time. Tell me again who is truly brave. Now, I would be dishonest if I didn't acknowledge that sensitivity often brings suffering. Many of you have experienced your sensitivity as a source of pain, anxiety, overwhelm, and isolation. There are real challenges that come with being highly attuned in a world that values toughness and stoicism. You absorb more of the world's pain. You're affected more deeply by conflict and cruelty. You may struggle with environments others find merely annoying. The fluorescent lit office, the crowded mall, the blaring television, these difficulties are real. But they stem not from any defect in your nature, but from the mismatch between your sensitive temperament and a society designed by and for the less sensitive. It's like being a night owl in a world structured entirely around morning people's needs. The problem isn't being a night owl. It's being constantly forced to live contrary to your nature. The suffering associated with sensitivity often comes not from sensitivity itself, but from believing something is wrong with you, trying to be someone you're not, lacking effective tools to manage your unique sensory and emotional experience, living in environments hostile to your nature, and being surrounded by people who devalue your gifts. These are all solvable problems. They require not that you become less sensitive, but that you honor your sensitivity and learn to work with it rather than against it. I once met someone who described themselves as recovering from sensitivity, as if sensitivity were a disease to be cured rather than a capacity to be honored. This person had spent decades learning to numb themselves, to shut down, and while they had indeed suffered less in some ways, there was a deadness to their eyes that spoke of a deeper loss. This is the bargain many sensitive people are pressured to make. Give up your aliveness in exchange for comfort. Surrender your deepest gifts to avoid criticism. Become less so that others won't be threatened by your depth. It's a devastating trade, and one no sensitive person should ever feel compelled to make. What truly breaks my heart is how many sensitive children are taught to distrust their natural way of being in the world. The little boy told to man up when he cries. The little girl labeled dramatic when she expresses her feelings fully. The teenager prescribed medication not because they're ill, but because their natural sensitivity is inconvenient in our fast-paced, sensory-assaulting world. These children aren't broken. They don't need fixing. What they need, what all sensitive people need, is understanding, validation, and practical tools for thriving with their sensitivity rather than despite it. So how do we transform sensitivity from a source of shame to a recognized gift? How do we honor this quality in ourselves and others? It begins with a radical reframing. Rather than seeing sensitivity as a problem to fix, we must recognize it as a capacity to nurture. Think of sensitivity as you would any valuable ability, like intelligence, creativity, or athletic talent. Like any gift, it requires understanding, development, and appropriate expression to reach its full potential. First, we must discard the false story that sensitivity equals weakness. This narrative serves no one except those who profit from disconnection and emotional suppression. The truth is that sensitivity, properly understood and channeled, is a form of strength, not the brittle strength of walls and armor, but the resilient strength of water which yields yet remains whole, which flows around obstacles yet ultimately reshapes the very landscape. Second, we must develop sensitivity-specific skills. Emotional intelligence is the foundation. This means learning to recognize, name, and work constructively with the full range of emotions you experience, neither suppressing them nor being swept away by them. The sensitive person's emotional range is often wider and more nuanced than others. This isn't a liability. It's a form of emotional intelligence that, when developed, allows for extraordinary depth in relationships and creative. Energy management becomes crucial when you process more information than others. Sensitive people often describe feeling overwhelmed or drained because they are literally taking in and processing more sensory and emotional data than less sensitive individuals. Learning to monitor and manage your energy, knowing when to engage and when to withdraw, how to create restorative spaces in your life, how to release emotional residue you've absorbed from others. These skills transform sensitivity from a burden to a sustainable gift. Effective boundaries are essential, but not the kind most people think of. For the sensitive person, boundaries aren't walls to keep others out, but membranes that allow conscious choice about what you let in and what you don't. They're not based on emotional detachment, but on clarity about your needs, values, and capacity. They don't diminish your sensitivity. Discernment represents a higher order skill for sensitive people. The ability to distinguish between what is yours to carry and what belongs to others, between intuitive wisdom and projective fear, between healthy emotional processing and rumination. This discernment doesn't come automatically with sensitivity, but when developed, It transforms sensitivity from a potential source of confusion to a reliable inner compass. Expression is where sensitivity finds its purpose, finding constructive outlets for the depth of feeling and insight your sensitivity provides through art, writing, teaching, healing work, advocacy, innovation, or simply authentic conversation. Transform sensitivity from a private burden to a public. These skills don't diminish sensitivity. They allow it to find healthy, constructive expression in a world that often feels overwhelming. I know a woman who spent the first 40 years of her life trying to be less sensitive. She developed a tough exterior, pushed herself through overwhelming environments, ignored her body signals, and dismissed her emotional responses as weak. She succeeded in her career, but was constantly exhausted, prone to mysterious illnesses, and deeply unhappy despite external success. When she finally recognized her sensitivity as a gift rather than a flaw, everything changed. Not overnight, but gradually and profoundly. She began honoring her need for quiet and solitude. She started trusting her emotional responses as information rather than weakness. She restructured her environment to support rather than deplete her sensitive nature. She found work that valued her natural empathy and perceptive. Today, she's not less sensitive. She's more effectively sensitive. She feels just as deeply but has learned to channel those feelings constructively. She's attuned to her limits not as failures, but as valuable information about what serves her and what doesn't. She's created a life that honors rather than fights against her nature. And here's what's most remarkable. She's more effective, more creative, and more impactful than ever before, precisely because she's working with her sensitivity rather than against it. This transformation is available to every sensitive person, not by becoming less of who you are, but by becoming more fully, effectively, powerfully yourself. What would happen if sensitive people stopped apologizing for their nature and started celebrating it instead? What if we recognize sensitivity not as a liability, but as an essential human capacity that our world desperately needs? I believe we stand at the threshold of what might be called a sensitive revolution, a fundamental revaluing of qualities long dismissed as weak or feminine or impractical: empathy, emotional awareness, sensory attunement, intuition, compassion, and deep listening. These qualities, the natural birthright of the sensitive person, are precisely what we need to heal our divided communities, restore our relationship with the natural world, reimagine our economic systems, and create truly human-centered technologies. The same sensitivity that allowed you to detect the subtle shift in your friend's mood is what we need to detect the subtle shifts in our climate before it's too late. The empathy that makes you cry at both tragedy and beauty is what we need to bridge seemingly insurmountable political divides. The emotional intelligence that helps you navigate complex relationships is what we need to create workplaces where people can bring their full humanity. Your sensitivity is not just a personal trait, it's a social resource. A form of human technology evolved precisely for creating and maintaining the connections that allow human communities to thrive. In a very real sense, the future depends not on sensitive people becoming tougher, but on everyone becoming more sensitively attuned to themselves, each other, and our living planet. Until that revolution fully unfolds, how do you live well as a sensitive person in a world that doesn't always value sensitivity? First, find your tribe. Sensitive people often grow up feeling like aliens, the only ones who notice what they notice, feel what they feel. This isolation compounds the challenges of sensitivity, but approximately 1 in 5 people share this trait of high sensitivity. Seek them out. Create spaces where sensitivity is understood and celebrated. Second, design your environment. Your physical space, schedule, and social environment should support rather than deplete your sensitive nature. This isn't selfish. It's necessary stewardship of your gifts. You cannot serve from an empty vessel, and sensitive people empty quickly in unsuitable environments. I know a teacher who transformed his classroom to honor both sensitive and less sensitive students. He created a quiet corner with reduced stimulation for overwhelmed students. He used natural light instead of fluorescence. He taught all students to recognize and respect different sensory needs, rather than treating sensitivity as a problem. The result? Both sensitive and non-sensitive students thrived, learning valuable lessons about diversity and accommodation that went far beyond academics. Third, practice radical self-compassion. The world may have told you there's something wrong with being affected deeply, with needing more downtime, with processing experiences intensely. Replace these messages with the truth. Your sensitivity is, your needs are valid. Your way of experiencing the world brings gifts no one else can offer. Fourth, find your unique expression. Sensitivity manifests differently in each person. For some, it flowers as artistic creativity. For others, as healing presence. For still others, as spiritual insight, scientific curiosity. Discover how your particular sensitivity seeks expression and honor that calling. I've known sensitive people who became extraordinary therapists, their natural empathy allowing them to sense what others missed. I've known sensitive entrepreneurs whose perceptiveness helped them anticipate market needs before competitors. I've known sensitive teachers who could read a classroom and adjust their approach to reach struggling students. I've known sensitive leaders whose emotional intelligence created workplaces of unprecedented collaboration and innovation. What all these people share is not the absence of sensitivity, but its conscious, constructive expression. Finally, remember that sensitivity exists on a spectrum. Some days you'll feel more attuned, other days less so. Some environments will amplify your sensitivity, others dampen it. This fluctuation is natural. The goal isn't constant, perfect sensitivity, but a dynamic relationship with this aspect of your nature. I've spoken about sensitivity primarily as an inborn trait, and for many it is. But sensitivity can also be cultivated, and I believe it must be if we're to create a more compassionate, sustainable world. Even those not naturally highly sensitive can develop greater attunement to themselves, others, and our living planet. They can learn to listen more deeply, to feel more fully, to perceive more subtly. This development represents not weakness, but evolution, the expansion of our human capacity for connection and care. So whether you were born highly sensitive or are working to cultivate greater sensitivity, know this: your sensitivity, your capacity to be deeply affected by life, is not just personally valuable, it's collectively essential. In a world racing toward greater disconnection from nature, from each other, from our own bodies and feelings, sensitivity represents a revolutionary act, an insistence on remaining human in increasingly dehumanizing contexts, a refusal to accept diminished versions of what life and relationship can be. The conscious sensitive person becomes a walking invitation to greater aliveness, deeper connection, more authentic relationship. Not through preaching or demanding change, but simply by embodying a different way of being, attuned, aware, alive to the fullness of human experience. I want to speak directly now to those of you who've spent years, perhaps decades, trying to be less sensitive, who've armored your hearts against a world that felt too bright, too loud, too cruel, who've hidden your tears, swallowed your concerns, denied your intuitions, and diminished your joy, all to fit into a world not designed for souls like yours. I see you, and I invite you to consider an entirely different path, not the path of becoming tougher, but the path of becoming more authentically, powerfully, and effectively sensitive. What might happen if you stop fighting this core aspect of who you are? If instead of seeing it as a liability to overcome, you recognize it as your unique gift to develop. This isn't about becoming more fragile or demanding special treatment. It's about embracing the fullness of your humanity and bringing your unique perceptive gifts to a world in desperate need of them. When someone calls you too sensitive, I invite you to hear those words differently, to translate them as, you notice what I miss. You feel what I can't access. You care in ways I don't understand. And rather than shrinking from that assessment, to stand firmly in the truth. Yes, I am sensitive, exquisitely, powerfully, necessarily sensitive. And that sensitivity is my gift to myself, to my loved ones, and to our world. I believe there's a reason approximately 20 of humanity is born highly sensitive. This isn't a random genetic variation or an evolutionary mistake. It's a deliberate feature of human diversity that serves our collective flourishing. Every healthy ecosystem needs diversity, different kinds of organisms performing different functions, responding to different stimuli, sensitive to different threats and opportunities. Human communities are no different. We need the bold and the cautious, the analytical and the emotional, the practical and the visionary, the tough and the tender. Each brings essential qualities to our shared project of creating a livable. Sensitive people have always played crucial roles as society's healers, attuned to suffering and naturally driven to alleviate it. Artists, translating subtle perceptions into forms others can access. Teachers, noticing and nurturing the unique qualities of each learner. Connectors, sensing and mending relational rifts before they widen. Innovators, detecting problems and needs others haven't yet noticed. Visionaries, sensing possibilities beyond current paradigms. Caretakers, maintaining the relational fabric that supports all human flourishing. These roles aren't peripheral to human thriving. They're central. And they depend on the very sensitivity some dismiss as weakness. In indigenous communities, sensitive individuals were often recognized as having special gifts. They became medicine people, storytellers, dream interpreters, conflict mediators, roles essential to community well-being. Only in our modern industrial society, with its emphasis on standardization, productivity, and emotional restraint, has sensitivity been devalued and pathologized. But that view is changing. As we face increasingly complex social and environmental challenges, we're rediscovering the value of the sensitive ones among their capacity to sense subtle shifts, to maintain complex relationships, to prioritize well-being over profit. These are exactly the qualities our future depends upon. Have you ever wondered why the very quality that brings you the most criticism also brings you the most profound experiences of connection, beauty, and meaning? Why the same sensitivity that makes you cry at commercials also gives you the profound joy of watching light play through autumn leaves? Why the same emotional responsiveness that gets labeled too much is also what makes you the first person friends call when they're hurting? There's a profound truth here hiding in plain sight. Sensitivity hurts in a disconnected world because sensitivity exists for connection. Your sensitivity isn't random. It isn't a design flaw. It's purposeful, a specialized human capacity evolved to create, maintain, and repair the connections that all life depends upon. When you feel everything so deeply, you're not malfunctioning. You're functioning exactly as you were designed to, as a human being exquisitely attuned to the web of relationships that sustains us all. The pain comes not from being too sensitive, but from living in a world that has temporarily forgotten the essential truth your sensitivity naturally perceives. That we belong to each other. That what happens to one happens to all. That separation is an illusion. Your sensitivity reveals this truth to you daily in ways both painful and beautiful. And in feeling it, in knowing it in your bones when others have forgotten, you keep alive the most important knowledge humans possess.